That's what leadership looks like. That's what extreme ownership looks like. If any of it is yours, it is all yours.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Business Lunch. I am your host, Roland Frazier, and my counterpart, Ryan Dice, on the other side of the screen from me. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm doing much better than one of our clients. They had kind of a rough end of the week last week, and I thought it might be fun for us, not fun for them, but I thought it might be fun for us to kind of break down what went down and maybe give them some advice, because I think there's a really good chance that pretty much everybody who's listening here, if you have team members, that you're going to have a similar experience. So here's what happened. They kind of found out through the grapevine that some of their team members were basically talking a whole lot of smack about them. Right. And so I think we all know that there are times when our teams will disagree with certain decisions and things like that. But in this case, apparently a number of team members went out for, for some drinks after work one day. They got together and they were talking, and they basically just spent the entire time, bad mouthing the CEO, bad mouthing the boss. And one person who was there kind of felt bad about it, and then essentially went and ratted on everybody else. And so it kind of creates this weird dynamic, because obviously there's an issue that's taking place. Obviously there's some people who aren't happy, and these are folks that the CEO values. From a team perspective, they were surprised by it. They were understandably hurt by it. The word I felt betrayed. The word betrayed was used a little bit, in this, and having been in this experience myself, I know this can really, really suck, because you feel like you're doing everything. You're not doing anything right, but you feel like you're doing the best that you can, and you hope that your team feels that as well. And then to find out that not only do they think that you kind of suck, but they're also going to kind of talk crap about you behind your back. So what do you do about that, right? How do you handle it? How do you make sure that? And now you got this other person. You don't want them to seem like a total narc, right? Now everybody's going to hate them. So it's a challenging dynamic. It seems like doing nothing, is kind of tough. So I had some feedback. I had some ideas. I'm just curious what you would do in that instance.
I mean, it's really uncharted ground for me, because I'm generally loved by everyone.
Well, you would first have to make a mistake, which has never happened.
Yeah, I think that we had this with one of our friends, Sam, who I don't know if you know this or not, but he has a real estate company and an escrow company, and the escrow company, basically he found out through one of the people that the entire escrow company was not only unhappy, but leaving to go work for his biggest competitor. And wasn't gonna say anything to him. And so I think that you have to understand first that people are going to do what's in their own interest. And so I get the feeling betrayed, but you just have to understand the people that work for you. Anyone you pay to be your friend is not your friend. And so like you have a relationship that is a business relationship with everyone that you pay to do something for you, including the people that work for you. And so you have to understand their loyalty is first to themselves, and that's how it should be. It should to themselves and their family. They got to take care of that. So I think if you understand that, maybe it makes it hurt a little bit less. It's never fun to find out that people were saying, nasty things behind your back. But unlike what I used to do, which is, where can I go on the dark web to hire a hit team to kill them all? Now the slightly more mature version of me says, there must be a failure of leadership if the entire group is doing that, and that falls to me. How can I improve to fix the situation? And so I think that's truly that's how I would try to look at it, in between the, pepperings of contempt. But, and I'm like, hey, these people used to be of value to me. I'm just kidding again. But so I think that for me, it would be, I would approach them each individually and say, listen, I'm trying to figure out how to do things better, and I'd love to get your honest, sincere feedback off the record. No strings attached to it. Tell me how you think, what do you think we're doing wrong, and what do you think we're doing right, and what specifically do you think we could do to improve it? And I would try to put in my own PIP, my own personal performance improvement plan to do better. What is our friend doing, and what are you thinking?
Well, I'm not quite sure what they're going to do yet.
Okay.
They're still swirling around in the emotional aspect of it, and I do think I love what you said there. It is important that you give yourself, if this happens to you, you've got to give yourself enough space to kind of let just the emotion of probably the dopamine or whatever the chemical is that just got unleashed into your bloodstream. You kind of got to let it fade. So they were ready to fire off some emails. I was like, you have to sleep for at least, and it was a Friday, right? I was like, please do not do this on a Friday and have it lingering. Like,
I remember you and I having conversations about not sending an email.
I have learned this from the best. And so, yeah, I think that is the first thing is you have to pause, right? That is thing number one is you just have to pause. And in that pause, I love what you said, I think, and I asked them, and it's funny, I did have this conversation with Sam, who's not the person I'm referencing. And so we know two people that this has happened to literally in the last like couple of weeks. I'm embarrassed to say that this has happened to me 4 times that I can remember, where I've heard through the grapevine that people that I trusted. So I say that just so that you know, if you've had this experience as a CEO, it doesn't mean that you're fundamentally broken or that you're a failure. I don't know a single CEO who is operating a team at any scale that isn't going to have this happen to them. I think the first thing, again, is pause. The second thing is to ask very sincerely after you've paused, how much of this do I own? And I remember chatting with Sam and being like, well, are they right? You know?
Good. Excellent first question, right?
And it was the same question I asked this person. I was like, based on what they said, are they right? And I think that's a really important question to ask because look, if they're right even 1%, then I think your follow-up posturing needs to be, at least in the beginning, to own 100% of that. I think that's really, really important. 1% is 100%. That's what leadership looks like. That's what extreme ownership looks like. If any of it is yours, it is all yours. Now, clearly they have their own mistakes that they've perhaps made in the communication of it. We can talk about that. But I don't believe that those mistakes would perhaps invalidate the overarching kind of issue challenge, which may just be kind of a cultural one. So we can come back to that. So I do think that those are the first two.
You have to also understand that they are, or it helps to understand that they are at that point, they have lived with whatever it was for long enough that it's percolated to the point where they feel a need, generally in a spontaneous explosion of emotion, to vent. And that's okay also, because people say things that they don't mean when they're venting, and people can be unnecessarily mean when they're venting, and they're frustrated too. So that's the other thing, is that, think about your worst thought that you've had in any situation where you were unhappy, and if you had it articulated, because clearly those comments were not meant to reach the ears of that CEO. However, it also is indicative that maybe there could be a better communication structure put in place for feedback so that it doesn't get to the boiling point that causes that explosion.
Yeah, and if anybody's ever been guilty of doing this yourself, then you got to have some empathy for the person doing it to you. It's hard in the moment, that's why you got to sleep. But I think all of us have been guilty of saying things that we didn't mean, because very often we think thoughts, and it's not until we hear ourselves say them that we put them to any kind of truth test. And then we hear ourselves say them, and now if we say them in a group, you'll have people in the group who don't necessarily agree with you, but just to not make things awkward, or just to be they'll go along with it. And we know this happens. So I think it's also important to acknowledge we can see this as like this almost conspiratorial betrayal. Like, everybody's against me. And very often the other people who are there were just trying to like de-escalate the situation, agreeing just to sort of move on. So I think it's really, really important just that you have this context in mind, that you give everybody the benefit of the doubt.
And then you're advocating a head of the snake kind of strategy, right? Then you find the ringleader and then terminate them, like with a police escort out of the building. And
you could call it head of the snake. You call it a prison yard strategy as well, where you show up and just the first person, you just beat them to a pulp. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. I guess I'm thinking that. No, let me tell you. So that's a good transition. Here's what I don't think that you should do. I've never done this, but I've been tempted to do it. And this person was considering it. They were like, I really think that I probably should just fire the people that were involved. And I'm going to encourage you, don't do that. Firing people is always an option, which is why you shouldn't do it first, right? So don't just go out there and fire. You need to get the full, even if you're quote unquote right, even if there isn't a legal liability, culturally speaking, it sends a message to the rest of the team that if you speak ill, you're going to get fired. So we don't want that. So just going in and firing people, obviously violence is never the answer. If anybody wasn't sure, we were joking ahead of time. Here's another thing that I have done that you shouldn't do. Don't send a passive aggressive memo to the entire company. I've done this. I've been like, it's come to my attention that some of you in the team aren't happy about certain things. And, just know that blah, 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 blah. Well, here's what happens. Everybody pretty soon figures out exactly what's going on, including the people who never would have known, never would have been impacted. And it winds up causing weeks-long kerfuffles and doesn't actually address, the real issue. So please don't send some kind of passive-aggressive memo. Also, and I think this is just as important, I've tried this before too, you can't just act like nothing happened. And that's something that I have attempted multiple times. You know what? They probably didn't mean it. You know what? Everybody's busy. You know what? It's stressed out. You know what? Some of this is my fault. I'm just going to let it go. I'm just going to let it slide. Every time that's happened, the situation wound up getting worse, not better. So I don't think you should do any of those things. What I would do, and you kind of said it, you've got to go out, reach out to the individuals directly, right? I think that's really, really important. You got to go out to them directly. You've got to go out to them individually. I like to do it via email so that they have time to process it and not get defensive. So if you walk up to them and you're like, hey, I understand this happened, good chance that they might get defensive and be like, oh, so, and it becomes very unproductive. So I like to send an email that's just like, hey, just want to make you aware, heard through the grapevine that you're unhappy about some things. I just want to be clear, everybody in this company is entitled to their own opinion. Also, having given it some thought, I'm sure that I own a lot of this. I would really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you and maybe share the why behind why we're doing what we're doing or why we've done what we've done. And so I think it's important, individual outreach, let's have a conversation, share the why. Now, you might be thinking, because I've dealt with this before with fairly low-level team members. And it was a little bit frustrating because it's like, I don't really want to have to spend time in my day talking to essentially entry-level folks who don't even report to me.